Welcome, everybody. It's great to have all of you with us. Sam and I, as you know, we do hospitality talks. We are thrilled to have been invited by Buzz Travel Expo to put this session together for you. Sam, how's your day been?
It's been fantastic, and I'm especially delighted that we can uh, have a show on this Digital Travel Expo. So I'm really excited, and also to make some new friends during this panel discussion, and also all the viewers who are joining us. So please put some nice questions together for the panelists to make our discussions more livelier. So look forward to it.
Sam, you have it easy today because typically for hospitality talks, you were doing all the techie things. Today it's being done by our colleagues. So you have a lot of time today.
Well, I'm really happy about that. It's a nice change. So I think we need to consider how we're going to do this in the future.
So you want to tell a little bit about the hospitality talk so that our viewers would know?
Sure. We started in February. In fact, we started to talk about the concept of hospitality talks with Abid, and we thought we want to have a discussion which relates to the burning topics and also that goes in everybody's mind. And this was before the COVID was hitting us. And when actually that started, then we started around the world for hospitality professionals who would be interested to join our panel discussions. And we started to get a lot of interest from consultants in interior design, architects, general managers, and etc. And this has really created a very interesting and lively discussion, which can be seen more on our YouTube or LinkedIn channels. And we have been able to provide a great deal of value. And more importantly, Abid and myself, we have been learning a lot in this process, considering that we both have a privilege of working around the world for quite a long time, but we never had this situation happen to any of us. So we're all learning as we go by how to deal with this pandemic situation and the post-COVID situation.
Well, fantastic. So we were thrilled when we were asked to put this panel together. So all of our viewers, hopefully from Hospitality Talk, have joined us on this platform today. We've got a great panel for you, food and beverage professionals. So without any further ado, Sam, if it's okay, let's bring in Chef Robert Wiedmeyer, who's the owner of RW Restaurant Group. Robert, welcome to this session.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and talk about these very pressing topics.
It's definitely interesting times that we're living in, Robert. You've been in this business for a very long time. Tell us how you have seen the restaurant industry and food scene evolve over the years.
Well, if I go back from when I first started cooking back in like the late 70s to where we are today, it's changed drastically. And I'll just go through a little bit of historical background. If you go from, let's say, 1980 to where we are now in 2020, I mean, the fact that you can go on YouTube and go learn how to make a foie gras, torchon foie gras, or learn how to debone a duck. None of that was possible until all these different avenues of being on the computer were able to do that. We had to actually go work for a chef and learn from a master chef and then pass that on and work and do that. Now you can my son has rebuilt cars off YouTube, rebuilt computers off YouTube, and you're getting a lot of novice cooks that have been able to go onto YouTube and other channels and learn how to make a béarnaise sauce and if a béarnaise sauce breaks, how to fix it. And it's all on there, everything. So I've seen that kind of change.
Has that enhanced the consumer expectations? Do they know more about food and different flavors? How has that changed when they come to dine with you?
Well, if you take the food and the beverage, I'm going to combine them both. Yes, it's made it, the consumer is much more educated on the products. For instance, and we just talk about, where's fish coming from? They want to know if it's wild. They want to know if it's been farmed. They want to know where this is coming from. They know about truffles now. almost every restaurant, I mean, it's in a hierarchy of a $60 tab, not all, but they'll have foie gras on the menu, which that was only that one time that was like, oh, they got foie gras. It's really special. So yes, the consumers become very, very educated, not just on food, but on wine too, on beverages. It used to be you could do a wine list and, you didn't have robertparker.com where you could go on there and see what it's rated and what you should be paying for it. And they can do that right at the table. I mean, now because of the Food Network and the TV programs and everything else, people are much more educated on food. They know the terms. That's why everybody's become a foodie.
Well, at least we hope to be foodies, or we pretend to be foodies. I don't know how well we are truly foodies, but technology has accelerated knowledge gains. So tell us, we live in the world of YouTube, Instagram, food channels. Tell us, how has that changed the business acquisition? How do you find new customers for your establishment?
Well, if you use your IT stuff, if you use it properly, if you use your online reservation systems and actually get in there and really plug in the information. What I mean by plugging the information, not just their phone number and name and they're having an anniversary, but going beyond that, like what they normally have for a drink, what they normally do for wine, what they like to eat, what they ate last time. So if you're running an upscale Michelin starred restaurant, you have the ability to go through every single client that's coming in and have history on them about what their likes and dislikes are, or what they ate last time, so you don't repeat it. So it's only as good as you use it. However, on the other end, we've gotten inundated with IT stuff now. So it's like it used to be, the phone would ring, the person would answer the phone, the maitre d' would answer the phone, they'd write it in pencil, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, 2 people, anniversary, thank you very much. Now we've got all these other systems that have attached onto the restaurant, which are actually cost you money. So it's actually, yes, it can enhance your business if you use it properly, but if you don't and just paying for it, it's actually draining money out of your pocket. So yeah, it's good and it's bad. It's all on how you use it. And there's a lot of stuff out there now.
No, no doubt.
You can wake up every morning and look at your phone. I can look at my phone and go, I can have every rating, every complaint, every compliment at the touch of my fingers at 9 of my restaurants.
And that's a good thing, so that you can respond to it. You can make sure that the people are going to get the experiences that you are trying to deliver. At the same time, if technology is not deployed correctly, it can create issues. Robert, I'm going to turn it over to Sam here in a second, but before I do that, I understand your operating model is you lease spaces and then you put a concept together for that particular space. Tell us what goes into selecting a site and how do you develop some of these different concepts, because you've got from a Michelin star restaurant to some relatively casual dining affair.
So, I had Marcel's for like 10 years, which was my fine dining restaurant. I didn't open up another restaurant until after 10 years I did it. Well, why did I do that? One reason was that my executive chef that was with me had been with me for a long time. So I wanted to open up another casual brasserie. Open up a casual brasserie, which I did, Brasserie Beck. It got selected by Esquire magazine as the best new restaurant in 2008. And everybody thought it was a novel idea, a brasserie in Washington, D.C. I'm like, there's nothing novel about a brasserie. They're all over Paris and Brussels, in the UK, in London. But in DC, it was a big thing. Todd remembers this. So in selecting restaurants, for me, it was, okay, I wanted to be able to, get a bigger, wider net to feed people. So Marcel's, the average check can be anywhere from $150 to $600, depending on what you're drinking, obviously. Brasserie Beck has got an average check of $65 to $80. My Muscle Bar and Grills, which are very casual, which I did after a restaurant in Brussels called La Poubelle, which means the trash can in French. It's a mussel and frite place where you just eat mussels and fries and you drink Belgian beers. Very casual. We play loud rock and roll music, and that's got an average check of $35 per person. So I kind of like spread myself out there in the sense culinary wise, and also being able to reach people that can't eat at Marcel's because they just can't afford it, but they can go have my cuisine at a much lower price and, if you're doing everything correctly, it doesn't matter if you're cooking in a Michelin-starred restaurant or a brasserie, the food should be great if you have the same integrity in what you're buying and how you're using it.
Are customers of Muscle Bar or your other restaurants, is one group more demanding than the other?
Not really. I would say, on a whole, I'd say probably they're easier at my more expensive restaurants and more demanding probably at my least expensive restaurants. Because if they're going to the Muscle Bar and they think it's, Chef Robert Wiedmeyer's concept from Marcel's, they're high expectations when they're getting just mussels and fries and a salad or a steak frite. And they're looking at much higher expectations at a very casual restaurant sometimes. So sometimes they can be a little bit more harder on that establishment, even though it's still was great food. But, we all make mistakes in the restaurant industry. Nobody does it. Not every night do we put out everything perfect. I'd like to say we do, but, salt in the wrong cook's hand is poison. So, it all depends on who's cooking it.
I've never heard of that analogy, but I'll have to remember that. Sam, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, Robert, it's very interesting. I've been looking at the kind of different concepts that you have and different restaurants. And I need to ask you first, are all your restaurants currently open?
No, the only one I have not opened is Marcel's.
Okay.
I'm waiting on that. And the reason why is that the clientele that comes to Marcel's and spends that kind of money and wants that kind of experience are well-traveled, well-heeled individuals that are probably not having to worry about money, and they're elderly. They're anywhere between 55 and 75. And I don't think they really want to put themselves at risk during this COVID pandemic, and they're probably going to stay home. So I'm debating when I'm going to open it up or when I'm going to open it.
Yeah. I was before I came, we started to prepare for this show. I was asking around with my friends, and one of my friends is in Lyon, and she asked a question. Maybe I can address it to you. How much do you think customer experience will suffer permanently with the changes brought by COVID? And what is this going to mean for restaurants that are heavily relying on this experience? And she's referring to Michelin star rated restaurant.
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult. I think that, when she started having the sommelier walk up to you with gloves and a mask on his face and try to explain the wines, it just takes away the whole romance, the whole experience of the dining experience. Yeah. I mean, I would say to myself personally, if I was not in the restaurant industry and I decided to go out to a restaurant, a Michelin-starred restaurant, and everybody's wearing masks and gloves, I'd probably look at my wife and say, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I feel the same.
Right?
I will know in Copenhagen. This René Redzepi has taken a very interesting approach by reinventing. He opened it. The Noma is closed as we know it. But now he has he sells hamburgers and wine at the terrace. So just in order to get the very casual approach, there's no reservations required. You can just come for a glass of wine or come for a cheeseburger that costs about maybe $18 per burger. But it's going to be a good burger. But how do you feel about reinventing the concept on a formal restaurant at this time? Does that make sense, or do you prefer you can use to open it?
The question on that, the answer on that is that it depends on your lease. It depends on your relationship with the entity that you're in and what your economics are within your lease, or if you own the building. A lot of people at this time right now, a lot of chefs, a lot of restaurateurs are renegotiating their leases during this time and trying to get, a deal, because, you're basically walking into a burning building and saying, we're going to start cooking food here, in hopes that some people are going to come out to eat. So changing the concept of Marcel's to do burgers and stuff like that, I just don't see myself doing that at this time. Not that it won't work for some people to do that, but I want to wait and see how this goes down the road with getting a vaccine for COVID-19, and hopefully things will turn and we'll get back to some normalcy here.
Yeah. I was talking to a couple of my friends who also are running some restaurants, mostly in Asia. And what he was saying is that the kind of restaurants that are exceeding the business volume that they did before are his pizzas. So meaning all the casuals. How is it for you? You have different types of restaurants. How do you see the
Casual places are doing okay.
yeah?
The ones that are a little bit more expensive, like my Wildwood Kitchen and Lock 72 and Marcel's was not open, but the other two are open. They're not doing as much business. But the casual restaurants, they got big patios. Those are the ones that are doing business.
Yeah.
People want to sit outside. They want to be out. They don't want to sit inside. You can't blame them.
Yeah, of course. Do you think somebody else was asking me, will spontaneous dining be the same, or will dining become more of a planned event where people take more time to consider their options where they're going to eat? Because here in Helsinki and also in other places, people can be quite spontaneous. Well, let's go and eat there, and because we've been there before. Or do you see that people are taking their time and they are taking the time to make a reservation, or before they even consider to come to the restaurant?
I think people are going to be a lot more cautious. They're going to go on the internet, see what type of precautions you've taken as a restaurant in your policies and your steps on keeping the place sanitized. I think people are going to be very, the younger people, not so much, but people that are in that age bracket that we were talking about, the 50-year-olds to the 75-year-olds, are going to be very, very cautious about when they make a reservation, how they make a reservation, how many people you can have seated in there that night. They're going to be curious about it. But on the other hand, they might not even go out to eat at a restaurant. Now, again, the casual restaurants, I think will do okay during this. They're not going to make money, but they're going to break even maybe.
Yeah. Have you done sort of the kind of takeaway systems where, I mean, at least here in the Nordics, a lot of restaurants who were forced to be closed, but they kept the kitchen open so they can keep the staff.
Yeah, curbside pickup's never going to go away now.
Yeah,
I think it's here to stay, and actually, it'll be a good thing even after they get those pandemics over. It'll be another revenue stream for restaurants, because a lot of people are going to we just call the restaurant and they bring it right out, put it in our car, and we leave.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't feel like getting dressed up tonight or going to a restaurant. We just want to pick it up and go. So I think curbside pickup is here to stay. Okay, none of my restaurants, all my restaurants will continue curbside pickup forever.
Yeah. But do you mean also that will that be that you have a very particular menu that only works for that curbside, or
yeah,
are you
got to be really careful. A lot of the restaurants aren't doing that properly. They're doing food that doesn't travel well. And when you do food that doesn't travel well, and then the people get it home, they're like, "Why did I order this?" So you got to do food that travels well. Braised items. You should be doing, pommes frites or French fries to travel. They don't travel. They'll be soggy and they'll go when you get them. So you got to really think the menu out, and you don't want the menu to be too big either.
That's right. Great. Robert, thank you very much. Great to get your thoughts on this. So over to you, Babbitt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Robert, I can relate to the food not traveling very well. Recently, we had ordered some food, and by the time it got to us, it was a total different thing than what we had remembered dining in the restaurant. Right. So it is a different segment almost dealing with the takeaways. Now, this takeaway is going to be part of how the restaurants continue to operate. Do you have to do anything differently to make that happen? You talked about having a particularly different menu. Restaurants are thin margin business to begin with. After COVID, it's operating at 50% capacity or under other restrictions. Takeaway is another expense. Yes, it gives you revenue, but it does take away, no pun intended, part of your profit. Help us understand how these different revenue streams and expenses work.
Well, the cost about doing takeaway would be buying the containers and the bags for all that to go, and then just putting something on your website that people can go right to the website, order, and then you just, they pick it up. There's not a whole lot of overhead in doing that, but there is cost in buying the takeaway stuff. I mean, the boxes and the bags and the instructions. You got to put down the instructions for some of the stuff. So yeah, there is some downfall, but if it's done properly and well thought out, it can actually be a really good revenue stream for all restaurants. Fantastic. Like I would never do, like at Marcel's, I would never do my tasting menu to go takeaway. I mean, it's impossible to do. But we could do some other things like my lobster bisque and my roasted tarragon chicken. We could do that to go.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, Robert, in U.S. terms, government had extended some of the help during COVID, whether it was PPP or some of the other incentives that were offered. Did you partake in any of that? Can you help us understand how that might have helped the restaurateurs or hurt them?
So you saw in the PPP, the payroll protection plan was going out. There was a lot of chefs and restaurateurs speaking publicly about it, that it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the restaurants. And the reason why they were saying that is because when they first rolled it out, it was like 75% of it had to go to payroll within a very short time. So, for instance, at my restaurant, if I brought everybody back the moment they gave me that money, well, they would just be standing around doing nothing, getting paid. So we said to them, we went back to the government, we went back and we pleaded. I was on news with the labor secretary not too long ago and explained that the PPP is not sustainable. And the reason being is that if we just use up the money without making any income, and then when we really need the money, when we can open, it won't be there. So what's happened is a lot of the employees have gone on unemployment plus the stimulus on top of it. So they're making more money staying at home than if I was to bring them back at, let's say, a 25% reduction of their salary. So that ends in July. So the PPP has been great if you use it properly. If you don't use it properly, you might owe the government a lot of money at a 1% loan over, I think it's 2 years, which isn't that bad. But to just take it and start paying people their payroll with it with no business, no customers was a waste of time. Waste of money. I should not a waste of money.
Yep, true. And quite candidly, if there is no business, the staff is not going to enjoy it hanging around.
No, they don't want to be there. The morale's down. They don't even want to be there. So
one last question before we bring in our next guest, Robert. There are lots of things that I can continue to talk about, but help us understand the farm to table type of movement or sustainability things that are being talked about in the food industry. Is it really catching on, or is it mostly a hype today?
Well, again, so farm to table, to me, it's kind of like a stupid thing, because if you worked in great restaurants, that's all you did was bought from the local farmers and took the food that was local as much as you could and made your dishes out of that. So I've always only done farm to table cooking. So farm to table, kind of that term came out about, let's say about 8-9 years ago, Todd.
Yeah.
So everybody was farm to table, farm to table, farm to table. Half the places are not doing farm to table. I mean, they'll say they're doing it, but I don't think you can do all farm to table in today's market unless you've got a little tiny restaurant out in the country and you change your menu every day. Right?
Fair enough. And having tried some of this from local farmers, when I was based out of Asia, quite candidly, you couldn't even get enough produce or enough materials to be able to do this. So, well, thank you.
We try our best to do that, but you can't do it all farm to table.
Fair enough. Thank you so much, Robert. Please stay with us. There are lots of other questions. We will come back to you, but at this point, I'm going to bring in our next guest, Todd Kilman, who is a journalist and editor and has been a foodie for a very long time. Todd, welcome to our session with Digital Travel Expo and Hospitality Talks.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. And it's climbing, by the way.
Oh, I beg your pardon. My apologies.
That's okay.
How's your day been? And you have seen the food business evolve for a long time. Anything you would like to add relative to how this industry has changed over the last 5-6 years?
It's changed dramatically. The operations of restaurants, the kinds of restaurants we're seeing now, and I know this both as a journalist and an editor, and also as a consultant. We're seeing also just incredible changes that have happened within operations over the last 5 years. Restaurants have changed dramatically the way they've been doing business. That's mostly been invisible to diners and to developers and to business people on the outside who are constantly looking at restaurants and seeing how they might fit into their plans. The food media business is in tremendous flux. The last 2 weeks, huge changes in this country, and I suspect they will ripple outward. Food media has been collapsing. Food media over the last 5, 6, 7 years has gone through a dramatic shift. So there are so many people that I would consider to be amateurs in this mix now. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of them don't have training. There are people who are amateurs who are working at the professional level. The market for that is incredibly glutted. You have people who are doing aggregation. They are borrowing the ideas and the reporting of other people and repackaging it. You're seeing that happen at a level which you would be probably surprised if you knew that was going on. There's a lot of slipperiness going on. The kind of people who are doing this work now are, in general, less well-traveled, or the kind of traveling that I would consider to be the important kind, where you're really immersed and you're going on to soil of another country and immersing yourself in that culture and trying to understand from the inside. There's much less of that kind of travel informing the writing. There's much less seriousness. I don't mean that the writing is stiff and ponderous. I just mean that there's a lot less real engagement, and there's a kind of a basic trendiness and a lifestyle component that is become predominant.
We were talking about technology and impact on this business with Chef Robert. From where you said, you talked about food media is pretty much going away. Any other things that you have seen that might have been a seismic shift in our industry that was brought about by technology?
I mean, tech is changing almost everything that we're seeing, and we're seeing the ways that apparatus in our lives has set the conditions for what's happening now with this crisis. Almost every exchange now is happening through tech. The restaurants that are navigating this well, the fashionable term is pivot. The ones who are pivoting well are relying to an inordinate degree on tech. They're in some cases changing around entire operations using different point of sales, different ordering systems in order to make things possible. They're relying on media campaigns to do work that previously they would have done themselves in-house, maybe at a small level, maybe going out through email and other means. It's creating dramatic changes, and the ways that tech is a part of the food world. I mean, it's something that was touched on earlier. There have been some really good things that have come about because of it, some new things that have come about because of it. There have also been a lot of bad things, and we're kind of in that position right now where there are people who don't necessarily know how to humanize the tech. There are people who are beginning to make inroads with it, do interesting things with it, but others who are abusing it, and who are, if not abusing it, but they're using it in a way that is not bringing about let's say, a better world, or a world of more understanding.
Todd, the role of a food critic, and you and I briefly talked about it in our prior conversation. You know, when a food critic was to show up at your restaurant, all hell was breaking loose because chef was tense and the staff was tense. Is that much emphasis still being placed on the visits of food critics, or are people more reliant on the apps that do crowdsource reviews, that sort of aggregate the reviews, and and consumer finds more comfort through them?
It really depends. There are restaurants where the presence of a critic in the room still sends flutters, and they will scurry. But for the most part, um, the really savvy restaurants know that they should be treating everybody who walks in as a potential critic, because everybody now has the tools to go out online. The the kinds of things we're seeing now are that um, the critic is much less of a force, I think. You have other kinds of food media people who are in this. You have um, one of the scourges in the Western world, at least from my perspective as an editor and a writer, influencers. I know they're important for the role of travel, but they've done some great damage in the world of restaurants. But this is a different calculus, and there are a lot of big changes afoot. And also, what's happened is that people are less reliant on a single voice or a couple of key voices to give them insight. People seem to like kind of a consumer reports, which is what Yelp has brought. And keep in mind, Yelp is a company based in the United States. The United States has a long-standing tradition of hostility and disdain toward the expert, toward the one person who is educated, well-traveled, um, well-watered, well-fed, who kind of knows and has taken the time to learn. We're seeing the same kind of antipathy toward experts now in our public health crisis as well. But Yelp was created with that in mind, with the idea of giving voice to a range of people. Of course, what you see a lot of people who don't know anything. And the defenders of Yelp will say, well, you are getting an aggregate, and the aggregate, everything will even out. And it sometimes doesn't work. And of course, there's a lot of lying that happens on Yelp as well. There's
Yeah,
a lot.
unfortunately, I think technology can do wonders if it's used properly, but there are people that are going to abuse it no matter what segment of life that technology might exist. And no different for Yelp, or if you go to TripAdvisor or any of these sites that aggregate consumer comments, it becomes a challenge at times. Todd, tell us some of the attributes in some of the successful restaurants. What makes a restaurant really tick with the diners? And I'll turn it over to Sam here, but before I do, just help us understand what really makes a restaurant successful. What makes it tick with the diners?
A great restaurant is a restaurant where all the parts are moving really well together in a really tight knit of purpose. And that could be a simple place selling potatoes that get topped, and it could be an elaborate 3-star Michelin restaurant. As a critic, and I ate out more than 500 times for close to 15 years. What you sense is that when you're in the presence of a great restaurant, within about 5 minutes, there's an energy in the room, there's a crackle, and that's not buzz. And I think a lot of people who are the trendies among us would say, well, it's about a buzz. It's not about a buzz. It's that in a good restaurant, the morale is really high. There's a sense of camaraderie on the floor. You can tell in a good restaurant how the staff is being treated, because that comes through in how they treat you. A lot of times diners will blame a bad night on a server, and often the server isn't really to bear the brunt of the blame. The blame should go to management for not supporting that server, giving that server the means to succeed, the training to succeed, the support on the floor to succeed. So you sense it. You sense this crackle, this energy, this idea that the people who are on the floor, who are the ambassadors for the back of the house, as we say, that they know what they're doing, and they understand the role that they play, and they're being supported, they're being cared for, and they are really an extension of that entire operation. And then beyond that, there's I mean, I've seen restaurants with great food that just weren't great restaurants. It's sad. It happens more often than you'd think. And I've seen places with great service that had middling food, but were somehow, because of the way the parts fit together, they became very good restaurants. Um, Sometimes one element predominates, but it's really the gestalt. It's the fusion of these elements, and it's a fascinating thing. There's so many different models for success.
It's a big puzzle, and all the different pieces have got to fit together. One last question before I turn it over to Sam. With COVID, our life has changed dramatically. People's dining habits were changing to begin with. COVID might have pushed it a little more. The office scene in CBD is going to change because a lot of people are doing what we do, and they're working remotely. They use digital tools. How do you think restaurants can survive in this environment? But more importantly, what would you recommend that they do to thrive in this environment?
I think it's a great question. I think restaurants have to recognize that ultimately they are the middleman. And what I mean by that is that on one end there's what we as diners, as patrons, love. We love the idea of these raw materials coming into this place, people who've got years and decades of training, knowledge, passion, know-how. And then there's us, and we want these goods. We want to connect to these goods. We like what these people are putting out. Right now, the middleman is suffering because we can't go to that middle. So that sounds really simple, but it's a profound idea, I think, because what a restaurant has to do is has to rethink what it is, and we don't tend to think of a restaurant as a middleman. We tend to think of them in romantic terms, and we should. I mean, they're the places we go for anniversaries and birthdays. They're the places we go to celebrate. They're the places we go when our lives are anxious and scattered, and we need some kind of form of caress. They're the places we go to kind of negotiate, make meaning. But right now we can't have that. And so the successful restaurants right now are those that are going to say, we have this stuff, we have this ability to prepare this product, these products that people like. How do we get that to them? One of the things that's happening, I think, and will continue to happen, is that the restaurants that were the most plugged into the changes that were already happening last few years are the ones that are probably in the best position to turn around and succeed. And that's to take these new systems, systems of simplification, restaurants that are taking models from fast food chains that are simplifying their online processes. I think the restaurants that come out of this and thrive, or thrive in the middle of this and continue to thrive, are going to be hybrids. I mean, I'm seeing that in the work that I'm doing as a consultant. I think restaurants that understand that they are more than one thing, that there's more than one thing happening under that roof, are best positioned to succeed. I think we start seeing things like traiteurs, which are popular in Paris, where there's more than one mode of getting the cooked, processed food, fabricated food, gloriously fabricated, to the patron. Restaurants that sort of see themselves as occupying more than one niche, I think will do quite well ultimately. And I think what comes out of this is that our understanding of what a restaurant is changed. That there are more models, and whether that's good or bad, I don't know. It's different. I think it'll be an interesting thing. I think restaurants like Robert's Restaurant, Marcel's, ultimately be fine. What I worry about is the restaurants below that. He mentioned his Brasserie Beck. I think restaurants like that are in a more perilous position for the next few years.
Fair enough. I guess this COVID, we still don't know exactly how it'll pan out, what will change. A lot of the social norms might change at the end of it, but we'll have to stay tuned. Sam, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting observations and thoughts that you have, Todd. I was wondering now, do you see what generational differences are there in what the different customers are looking for, the millennials and Z, etc.? What are your thoughts on that?
There's a real generation gap in the food world right now, and it's going to become more profound. Younger diners, particularly in this country, are their concerns are different. Their assumptions are different. You're seeing it in things like wine. They're drinking much less wine at restaurants than previous generations, the baby boom generation, for example. Their habits, their loyalties to restaurants are different. They're not as bound as older generations were. They are also in difficult circumstances. They are they're being reshaped by this crisis. They've been shaped by the mountains of debt that our educational system, particularly college education system, college system has saddled them with. The lack of housing options. They just don't have most of them, other than the well-heeled, they don't have the funds to go out and eat the way somebody 20 years ago who was in their early 30s did, who's a professional. And so they've learned to moderate. They're doing things like they're ordering in. Their knowledge of food is probably higher than any other generation of Americans. They're going to school and they're having sushi chefs in their dining rooms. They're exposed to a wide variety of cuisines. They have a broad knowledge and in some cases a deep knowledge. And they're concerned about issues of social justice and widening the sphere of who is, allowed in the mix and what that means for dining. And just this past week, we've seen so many episodes of that in this country and the way that's going to reshape things. So I think that there's going to be, we're going to look back and we're going to see this as dramatic in the restaurant world, not just for what kinds of restaurants are still around, but for the kind of dining population we have and the kind of restaurant that people tend to want. I think there's this idea of fine dining is really, it's becoming more of a relic. This might be the thing that, at least for the foreseeable future, makes it an absolute relic. And that the emphasis is on these other modes. We're seeing the rise of so-called ghost kitchens or dark kitchens. We're seeing the way that people are ordering off of delivery services and having it brought to them. They're insisting on a high level of quality with those offerings, and they're watching a movie and eating restaurant food. They're finding different ways to slice this up, and again, they're looking at restaurants more as middlemen. They're looking at it in a more cynical, maybe at least a more practical way of, what is it that I want? I want the food. I want these tastes that I can't get anywhere else. I want to taste the globe. I want something that gives me a sense of experience, because I live in a mostly plastic world, a generic world, a world where I'm reduced to ordering things online with Amazon. I never see who these people are. And I'm being dominated by tech. I'm being dominated by corporations. So this meal, maybe it's a delivery of Northern Thai food, and it's it's some kind of a soup. I can feel that I'm having something authentic for at least 20 minutes. And that's driving a lot of what we've been seeing, and I suspect it continues to drive it.
Okay, very interesting. You mentioned about how the truly the food critics or the critics and the food media is has a lot of challenges, and maybe dying maybe is a dramatic word. But I was wondering then about the restaurant rating systems and sort of that official rating systems. How are they doing? Are they, is that, do you think that's still going to be surviving, or is that this thing of a past where the traditional ratings agencies like Michelin and so on are doesn't have the credibility that they had before? What is your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure Michelin has the credibility that it used to have, to begin with. It's become very hard to understand exactly what their standards are as they've gone outside of Europe. Other rating services, ratings are going to stay with us because people like them. They like that digestibility. I don't. I always try to get rid of ratings, rating scales wherever I was, just because I wanted people to read the words. I wanted them to take the time to read this piece that I thought was a contribution in some way to the culture, and that
Instead of
had
just reading the stars, right?
yeah,
No, that's
instead
a
of
good
just looking
point.
at stars. And a lot of times what happens is you'll sometimes read a review and you'll say, well, it's great. Why is it 2 stars? And I was at a publication that insisted on stars because that drives ad budgets, it drives circulation. But what happens is that people become really hung up on stars. I would get calls from people and they'd say, well, it's a special occasion. I want to go to such and such a restaurant. You gave it 3.5 stars. You gave it 4 stars. And I'd say, well, you probably are not going to be happy there. And they'd say, why? And I'd say, well, because restaurants at that level, they're getting those stars in part because they are doing something to push the conversation, if you will, in some way. They're doing creative things or innovative things, or they're doing them in a different way that feels new and exciting. They're not just simply putting out food. And most people who live an ordinary middle class, bourgeois existence would be happy with a 2.5 star restaurant. It's going to satisfy them at the base level, be a little cheaper too. Those restaurants are really for people who are culinary adventurers, not even foodies, but people who are really, they live to eat and they're living for sensation, and they're going into a restaurant with that sense that you go into a theater, show me something new, delight me, entertain me, take me out of my daily existence, my fears and my anxieties, and my world. Great food can do that. Not every restaurant can do that, but great food can do that.
Okay, my final question is, what do you see some trends in the cuisine, or if the, so to speak, new trends, if you will, that you are seeing emerging now, in particularly in the US or maybe elsewhere?
You're seeing a lot of chefs with Robert's level of experience and training, dedication to craft, passion, expertise, doing fast food or doing some version of fast food. That has been going on for a few years now, about 4 or 5 years now. It's continued to gain ground before COVID. I think it becomes one of the dominant modes of restaurant, for one reason that we haven't gotten into, which is that restaurants are exceedingly expensive. Rents have been really high, and labor in this country in particular has just been a problem across the board. It is really hard to find. Robert can attest to this. Really hard to find dedicated, experienced people to do that. We're even talking about finding inexperienced people at a low level. The difficulty of finding folks like that to just wash dishes, for example. And so what savvy restaurateurs have been doing is figuring out ways to adopt these or adapt these fast food models and use them to streamline operations, to eliminate labor, to kind of have a much more machine style to the preparation of their food. We've seen chefs who are doing things like I've joked to some chefs about it. It's sort of more like parfait assembly, where everything is done in the prep. Lots of sauces, lots of squeeze bottles, lots of different mise en place touches, and the food is assembled rather than cooked. Somebody at Robert's level and with that classical background, their typical system is when an order comes in, the pan gets warmed up, knob of butter goes down, and the dish begins to get cooked. That's happening less and less and less because people are having to rethink systems in order to get around these problems of labor, these problems of high rent. And what we haven't touched on is what the role of development is in all this, and business. And we've been seeing investors not supporting restaurants, moving away from support of restaurants. We've been seeing developers needing more and more restaurants in their developments because Amazon has just flattened retail. And so things that are tactile are more and more needed. Nail salons, massages, restaurants, grocery stores, those are the anchors of retail. But it puts an inordinate pressure on restaurants to perform, the need for more restaurants, and it continues to glut the market and thin the labor. So the restaurants that emerge out of this will be lean models. I can foresee a new generation of restaurants with fewer than 10 people working in them.
It's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. Todd, please stay with us. Unfortunately, we're running over our time, so I'm going to bring in our next guest at this point, Mike Lawless, who is the project manager with the Blue Plate Studio. Mike, welcome to our session.
Thank you, Avid. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Mike, tell us from a designer point of view, what have you seen that has become critical in restaurant designs? What is important in making those experiences really work?
I mean, it's a very interesting question, especially considering the situation we find ourselves in globally at this current time. I think that it was, I wouldn't say a constant battle, but something that was always these sort of two sides to the coin of the considerations that you had to think about when designing a restaurant is form and functionality. You want to make an attractive product that works operationally. I'm sure Robert will attest to having probably worked in restaurants that maybe weren't designed so successfully and ones that were, and there's a big difference. And now in this sort of very, very strange time that we find ourselves living in, I really think that there's going to be a third aspect that will take as big an importance in regards to, and that's safety. I think it's going to really drive a lot of the decisions that we as designers make in the context of a post-pandemic world. And of course, I agree with what Todd was saying in regards to the need for a vaccine is going to then sort of allow us to return to a certain level of normalcy. But at the same time, this has been such a profound global event that it really will impact the way that people dine and experience restaurants moving forward. So I think sort of health and safety considerations, rather than just ticking the box for government permits, are going to be absolutely paramount in the coming years.
Well, Mike, you've done a lot of work internationally, particularly when you go to Asia and Middle East. Buffets are a huge thing. Consumer wants them. But hotel and restaurants, particularly restaurants attached to the hotels, they put these lavish buffets together. Is COVID the nail in the coffin for buffets?
You took the words out of my mouth, Abid. I really do think so. It's I mean, it's something that pre-COVID we were seeing really the dwindling down of buffets around the world. I think it was something that some of the trends that Todd and Robert touched on in regards to what's been driving sort of the restaurant and food and beverage industries over the last 5 years is this reach towards authenticity in terms of the experience and the food. And buffets don't necessarily play into that. And it's something that we, as a designer from our clients and hotel operators that we partner with on our hotel projects, saw a vast reduction in the request for buffets. And what this meant in sort of luxury products was more a la carte service, especially in Asia and the Middle East, as you say. But then in more limited service food and beverage offerings in sort of select service hotels, we would see the rise of this sort of coffee shop model with the grab and go counters, allow people to come for grab a quick bite on their way out at the beginning of the day, a coffee, a sandwich, a pastry, something like that. And I think then now with COVID-19, it's going to be very difficult to convince people to come back to buffets. It already was a dated model when it comes to.
I agree.
Yep.
Yeah, it's something that just it's going to be very difficult to health and safety standards. But then also you think about it from a sustainability standpoint, food wastage, all of those items. I think it's a thing of the past, quite frankly.
And Mike, when you design concepts and you've done a lot of work, do you prefer freestanding restaurants with individuality? Do you like if the concept is successful, that can be replicated around the world? What has been successful from your point of view?
I would say there's not really a straight answer for that, because it really depends on the client, on the style of the project. I've worked on some restaurants in sort of huge chain hotels, and then I've worked on independent restaurants with just it was the passion project for an entrepreneur opening his first restaurant, and they're very enjoyable for different reasons. I think that the independent projects, you find yourself having more freedom, and it's more of sort of a conversation with the owner and the entrepreneur and the chef as well, and it's really a very collaborative spirit in that sense. However, it's not without its challenges. Oftentimes, budget might not be as big, but also there could be issues surrounding a lack of standards, for example, a lot more questions for us as designers in regards to, okay, well, is this legally allowed, and talking with the local permitting agencies, etc. Versus when you work for a larger brand, be it a larger hotel brand or a larger restaurant brand, they have their standards in place, and it's very sort of cut and dry what it is your role is and what it is that you have to do in order to execute this. So those projects tend to run very smoothly, but then they might not have the same kind of freedom to express yourself creatively. I think it's give and take. It really depends. I think personally, I prefer working on a mix of both of those types.
You mean you don't like the change orders?
Oh, I love
change orders. That wasn't my fault. That was the designer's fault.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's always our fault.
Sam, we are pressed for time, so let me turn it over to you, and I'll come back.
Well, I'll just do a quick question. I know there is, in our normal shows, we just go for, we don't look at the clock here, but here we have some time pressing. But I want to just ask, how do we address social aspects and ambience with physical distancing? Does it come in play when you are now starting to, you're creating some designs, or is it something that is not as important for you in the design stage?
I mean, there are a few things to consider here. I think that it's, first, how long is this going to last? Nobody knows. And there's certain temporary fixes that people are doing, a big shift towards outdoor dining, as was mentioned before by both Robert and Todd, which is huge for the restaurant industry being able to get back on its feet in that sense. But ultimately, I think that what Todd was touching on earlier, this idea that the crackle that you get from a successful restaurant, and really just the joy out and the joy of leaving your home to go to a restaurant, is something that so many of us have been starved of in the last few months. And while it's going to be strange to get back there, it's something I can't wait to do. And it's going to be a very sort of delicate balance, a careful dance between returning to a level of normalcy, but allowing certain safeguards to ensure that there's not virus transmission, etc. I walked past a restaurant the other day in Upper Manhattan, and it was a fine dining restaurant, and the waiters were all white glove service, silver platters, and the old school sort of white blazers. And on the silver platters was just a single bottle of hand sanitizer. On the terrace of this restaurant. And it was so weird to see, but it's commendable because at least they're trying to put their own signature on on this weird time that we find ourselves in, this trying to reopen. And social distancing, of course, is going to be a part of that, and we're going to have to consider that in our interior design jobs as we go forward. But the hope is that a vaccine will come around sooner rather than later, and we'll be able to return back to that, because ultimately seat count is so critical to, it's so directly related to revenue of a restaurant that it's impossible to say to a restaurant, no, 50% of your seats can't operate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your answers here, and over to you, Abid.
Mike, one question, and then we'll bring everybody back together for a little bit. What changes do you see in designs going forward now? The delivery component or curbside pickup is here to stay. The social distancing might be around. Buffets might be gone. Any things that you think are going to be permanent in design changes moving forward?
What I would love to see in terms of a more permanent shift in the way that we see our restaurants is really on a more macro level, is zooming out and looking at how we inhabit the spaces in which we live, in the cities that we live. And it has to be a shift in the streetscape. I live here in New York City, and I think it's cities across America. It's dedicated to providing road travel. And that's just not sustainable in this current time that we find ourselves. And it's really this pandemic, as awful as it has been for so many people around the world, it presents an opportunity. And from it, we have to adapt. And I think starting to allocate more space in our cities for public use, for dining, for outdoor dining, is a great step towards limiting the use of cars in heavily trafficked urban areas.
That's good.
And to sort of create this almost on the European model, that you see the Parisian corner bistros and the piazzas of Rome, they're full of tables. And actually just this week, there's talks of Arthur Avenue, sort of the epicenter of Little Italy in the Bronx, closing down the entire three-block stretch of Arthur Avenue to create a 100-table dining piazza based on the Italian model. And it's a certain sort of poetry to that it's an Italian immigrant neighborhood in New York City that is now looking back towards the way the Rome and European cities that way, and to adapt in that way to this time. And I think that's a big marker of it. Just be for fair weather times, as we've seen in European cities,
right.
You can have outdoor heaters. You can have these kind of semi-permanent structures that allow for comfortable outdoor dining. And that's something that I think has the potential to really redefine the way we use our cities, and restaurants can be at the forefront of that approach and that rethink.
Well, I hope the pedestrian are incorporated into urban planning, because I think that'll be healthier living, and businesses will thrive because there'll be more foot traffic. So let's bring everybody back together. And Robert, I'm going to start with you, asking one quick question. Gain consumer confidence and loyalty in age of Yelp and in age of COVID. Robert.
Wow. Get customer confidence. I mean, to get their confidence back in dining in the restaurants.
Yes, and their loyalty, so that they will.
Well, the loyalty is going to come from, people that come in there and have great service and great food and come back and walking out going, that was a great experience. That's your best advertising. That becomes your loyalty. People go out and go, you got to go to this restaurant. But we've already got that going on. It's like, how are we going to get them to have the confidence come back in and still be loyal? Like, I'm putting out an email next week to all my customers, 45,000 people from Marcel's, that I'm going to reopen on this date, and I'm only taking 40 covers a night. So I want to see how many people, loyal customers of mine, say, okay, I'm going to come out for dinner. So, I mean, the question is just, it's a hard one to answer a bit, because it's like, I don't know if you're starting from ground zero to do that. You're going to have to do, well, we're here, we got great service, we got great food, but we're also being very safe with the COVID-19 procedures.
Fair enough. Todd, a question for you. For the budding entrepreneurs that are looking to open restaurants, would you have wisdom for them and advice that they can rely on?
I
Apart
think
from don't?
apart from don't, right. Actually, it's funny. I used to teach college. I was a professor at Howard University for 7 years, and one of my students has been working to open a wine bar, and he's actually opening that next month. Really terrible timing. What I would say is one basic thing is that I think in the early days of the crisis, we were in a kind of a triage phase, and it was enough for restaurants simply to get product out, and people were just happy to have that connection and to feel they could support the restaurants that had been part of their lives. We're in a new phase of this, and it's an uncertain phase. And in this phase, the kind of work that I'm going to be doing some of already with clients is to help them rethink hospitality. What do you have to do now in an era when you have to be contactless? And that means not just contactless with the tech, but you can't be close. You have to have a mask. That smile is gone. That sense of warmth is gone. People are at a remove. The spaces have to be reconfigured. There's an aesthetic loss there. There's an emotional, spiritual loss, and so restaurants have to make up for that.
It
There are
is
different
going
things
to
that
be.
they try to make up for that, rethinking the way that they package or repackaging their hospitality. They can't do it in the old ways.
Yeah,
So they're going to have to use tech to do that. They're going to have to use the online means to do that. They're going to have to use greetings to do that.
I guess it's all different tools are going to have to be thought through, because what was applicable might not be applicable tomorrow. So, Mike, a question for you. You talked about the sanitizer on the silver platter. Hopefully the dispenser was sterling silver and the sanitizer had gold flakes in it. But do you see UV lights becoming part of the design element moving forward?
There's definitely some interesting technologies out there to explore. However, there's also a lot of questions. There's also almost more as it comes to such as UV light. Some of the solutions we've been looking at, it depends so much on length of exposure, the intensity of the light, and the surface that it's actually applied to, that it may not be effective. And so there's still a lot to learn in regards to how this virus can be combated using technological solutions. But I think as Todd mentions, that it's more, how do we use that technology? How do we harness that technology to create more contactless solutions or safer environments? And people don't really, it's going to be an interesting balance, because people don't want to feel like they're walking into a restaurant. But at the same time, there's going to be a certain, I think that all of these sanitary measures that were taken, the restaurants have been doing for years, since before coronavirus, was always done in the background. You never wanted to see anything that would suggest that there was anything ever that needed to be cleaned up, which obviously is absurd, because you want all the tables to be sanitary. Yeah. But then now there's an interesting shift. I think that there's going to be more of a desire from the guests to know that the space where they're sitting is clean and sanitary. I think the hospitality industry, or hotel industry specifically, offers an interesting example, which is the partnering between major brands and major hospitality brands, and then major healthcare brands, or sanitary disinfectant providers. For example, Lysol and I think it's Hyatt, but I might be wrong on that, have partnered, that when a guest comes to their guest room door, there's a sticker that seals the door that says your room has been disinfected with Lysol or whatever. And then when you open the door, that seal breaks. So you know that you're the first person to walk into that room since that happened. And I feel like it's going to be small adjustments and small touches like that, rather than a complete rethink.
Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. Well, the unfortunate thing is there was recently an expose in New York City about the hotels, that a few of the hotels were not even practicing the basic things pre-COVID. Look, we run out of time. We always finish our show with one feel-good thing. And so it would be remiss if we didn't do that. So I'm going to start with Todd. Todd, anything in a very quick way, anything uplifting, anything that you might have seen or learned something about yourself, please.
Humans are adaptable, and we're all alive.
That's a great thing. Robert, over to you.
I'd say getting to spend time with my 17-year-old son that I never probably would have spent this much time the past 3 months with him has been really nice.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is awesome. And Mike, last but not least, first side.
I think that I'm so inspired by the countless moments of generosity and giving in this time that people are experiencing such hardship themselves, but at the same time are willing to lend their time, their efforts, their money, etc., to help other people. It's just amazing. And I think in the restaurant industry, we're seeing a lot of that as well, which is
Right.
remarkable.
Well, that is quintessential hospitality. On that note, thank you very much, Robert. Thank you, Todd, and thank you, Mike, for joining this session. Sorry we ran over. Hopefully our viewers got a lot out of this. It will be a recorded session that would be made available for those of us who couldn't join live. So thanks from my side. Thank you to all of our viewers that joined live. Sam, over to you, please.
Well, just my final words. I want to thank Buzz Digital Travelex for giving the Hospitality Talks the venue to have a great panel discussion. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.